Hi there guys, and welcome to another Train Sim 2019 video. Today I'm showing off something that I've been really wanting to show off, but it hasn't been that simple because I'm really ridiculously rubbish when it comes to American stock. This is of course Searchlight Simulations AC4400 in the Canadian Pacific Golden Beaver livery. I like that. It's going to be my little bit of humour throughout the video. One thing I do just have to add is a bit of a disclaimer. Remember, I'm rubbish at American stuff. And loads of people just moan and go, learn how to drive, man! And all of that in the comments. So, thankfully, joining me today is a couple of guys from Searchlight Simulations. So, do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Anthony Wood from Searchlight Simulations. I'm the audio engineer and a texture artist, as well as a part-time 3D modeler for our company.
And I am Nate DeFayette. I am the co-founder of Searchlight Simulations and also the head of research and development for our various projects.
Excellent. Thank you very much for being with me, guys. So just to let you guys know, this isn't a scenario or anything, this is just a quick drive, just because there is so much included with this, and the loco is so complex itself. I really wanted to get into the nitty-gritty of what this is more than the scenarios, because my understanding of operations in the US is nil. So it's more for me about what this train brings to the simulator and what these guys have done within the Train Sim Classic engine that we have already. So really, to kick things off, we can see from the outside already it's absolutely beautiful. Nate, how long has this thing been in development?
Oh, this has been in development for about between 5 and 6 years, I'd say.
Jesus. So if you guys were coming up and you were just showing this off to someone straight off, I mean, I know a couple of things because I've driven this on stream, but there's really sort of mad things. I mean, one of the main things to watch was the brake cylinders, isn't it, that come off as well? They're animated and all sorts on this.
It's definitely a nice touch, yeah, if you want to show that off.
Yeah, what is, if you start with you, Woody, what would you say is your favourite? That is unreal. What is sort of your favourite feature of
the in-cab experience? It's like no other that has ever been presented in any train simulator that has been created to date. You feel so wrapped up in the action of running your train. You've got distance counters to know how long your train is and when you're clear of a slow order or a speed restriction. You've got the cab rattle. When you're wearing headphones, it's just incredible to hear everything you hear the panels creaking and rattling. You can hear the exhaust as you open up windows more and more. You can hear the traction motors whining as you gain speed. And you've got the seat bounce and everything from the air ride seats in the cab that are fully simulated to recreate your body remaining stationary while the rest of the cab kind of moves around you to support your back and keep you comfortable.
So suppose I should really say at this point that you two aren't coming at this from a sort of amateur train enthusiast background, as much as you do have that, or a rail fan background. You both actually work in the rail industry in the US anyway, don't you?
Yeah, I am 5 years on the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway, or BNSF Railway. I guess they've changed their name to permanently. And four of those years, I have been a locomotive engineer, which is the same as the UK's driver, essentially.
And Nate?
And I've been a conductor for Norfolk Southern Railroad for 4 years, and 0 of those years I've been an engineer.
Just to add, though, you both actually have experience of this, the Canadian Pacific version of this as well. Because what do you take?
Yes.
Oil trains, is it, that you sometimes get these on?
Yeah, BNSF has an interchange agreement where we take trains from Canadian Pacific that they come from Alberta and they go down south to Oklahoma, I believe. And we get these frequently as the leaders.
So you guys have come from a actual the professional side of this sort of thing. And I think this really shows in this, because one thing you said to me in the stream really that was really interesting was that this isn't aimed at beginners, is it?
Not necessarily. Well, it is relatively simple to drive a train on a fundamental level. You put your reverser in, you release your brakes, and you pull some throttle. It is more challenging to do it well. It takes some time to get yourself acquainted with how the locomotive behaves, how the braking characteristics work, how the dynamic braking characteristics work, and how well it can pull at low speed and high speed, and how to manage the slack. Because you have to remember, with a train of 6,600 feet, between each car you have 3 inches of slack. So you've got at least another additional 60 to 70 feet of slack traveling for your whole train length. So you have to manage that.
It's just crazy. And Nate, you were talking to me earlier about some of the simulation within the simulation of this, and I think you described it as a full-blown computer within a computer.
That's essentially what's been created with the IFD panels and the SDIS screens and all that. A computer's been built inside of a computer game, you know.
Yeah, it's just phenomenal. Woody, do you want to talk me through starting this up for me, mate? So, it's a super complex bit of kit, but I sort of have my way around it. So, on the back panel, it's put it into run, isn't it?
That is correct.
And then I want my lights on, short hood lead. And then I want hood lights on, don't I?
Yeah.
Right. Actually, while we're I tell you what. Since we're still, should we do a cold start?
Yeah. So unfortunately, one of our decisions we made ultimately was to not do a full cold and dark, and that is because in reality, with these types of locomotives, since they have auto start stop, you're never really going to show up to that locomotive being completely cold and dead, where the knife switch is pulled. You have to wait for the computers to boot up, because in reality, nobody in this game, or in reality really, wants to wait 10 minutes for the computer screens to start.
No, you really don't want to wait.
I can completely understand that. So to shut this thing down, Woody, what do I need to do?
What you'll want to do is have your isolation switch either in isolate or in start, and then hit the engine stop button on the back wall.
So that's that big push button, isn't it?
Yes.
The big red one, that should say do not touch.
There's the sort of buttons I really like. I think the last time I drove this, I turned there's a nice big flicky, like missile, end of train device switch, and I had to hit it.
Those are fun.
The end of it. Yeah, that was just too good. Right. So I have a bell going off now.
Yep, so if you put that isolation switch in the start position, the bell will stop.
Right, so let's do that then. Because that's quite irritating. Right, so that's the start.
It's very irritating when you're trying to take a nap, too.
No, we don't do that. We don't do that.
No, you can nap. You can't sleep.
I think it was the attendant call bell in this. I think Woody gave me a really good excuse of what that was used for earlier. So to start this up, I need to go down the side of the train, don't I?
Yep, so open up the back door of the cab and go down to the side where you can open up the cabinet doors to the start station.
There we go. We're open.
And if you
prime and then to start.
Yep, and it's all automated on these, where the computer will automatically prime it for a certain duration and then start to crank over once you flick it to the start position. So you just flick it one way for a little bit and then flick it the other way.
Yeah, that's what I've done. Let's hope it does something now. Yes, kick it in now. Love the exhaust effects on this as well. You've done a really decent job with them.
The General Electric locomotives are a 4-stroke, but they have a huge turbocharger on them, and they have that huge exhaust stack. So that means the velocity of the exhaust at idle and stuff like that isn't very fast. So it was really difficult to recreate kind of how it poofs out.
Yeah. So now that's my compressors kicking in. That's my door shut. So I just need to put this into run now, don't I? And it's the same sequence as we did before, yeah?
Correct.
So it's in run, short hood lead. Lights are on. And then we can go into the engineer's seat. And then it was Shift R for reversal, wasn't it?
Correct.
Let's get that forward. And then it was independent brake on. Take the train brake off. And then give it a little bit of power.
Yep. You do have to remember the generator field switch on the knee panel to the left.
I was gonna say let him. I was gonna say just let him do it and see what happens when it doesn't move.
What is the purpose of this generator field switch? I don't get, because we don't have anything like that on UK locomotives.
It's kind of a holdback from the old days, but nowadays it's used for safety. So a lot of railroads have what's called 3-point protection, where you have your independent brake fully applied, or air brakes also applied depending on how heavy your train is. Your reverser would be centered, and then that generator field switch would be down. And what that generator field switch does is it prevents any sort of loading, even if your reverser's in forward or reverse, from occurring in the train moving while you have somebody in between in a line of danger situation.
Right, I seem to have everything on, but I'm not moving. What have I not done? Right, my brakes are released.
Did you switch the switch back to run?
I've got RPM and amps, supposedly pulling amps, so yes, I must have done. Yes, in run.
It might take a little bit more power to get moving.
That's what it might be, to be fair, yeah.
Especially with a loaded train, it might take up to notch 4 or 5 to get moving once you get the slack rolled out.
Let's see if that'll do it.
If you start to experience wheel slip, you can always hit the lead axle sand button, and it'll start applying sand on the front truck of each locomotive in the consist.
We're moving. Slowly but surely. I think I've got a brake on somewhere still.
Oh, that's the other thing. So with this locomotive, we went through a lot of development time trying to recreate as best of our ability within this game the brake pipe propagation and how long it takes for the brake pipe to recharge and the brakes to release on each car in the train, depending on how long your train is.
It's going to be, because I'm taking up slack now. Now I'm getting some pull now. Wow! $585 amps pulling, that's going, yeah, we're getting there now. The back of my train has started moving. So people have already noticed the cab bounce. You touched on it really briefly earlier there. So that's the air ride suspension that's in the seat. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And that's something that's specific to the Canadian Pacific ones?
Yep, only the Canadian Pacific Railway that I'm aware of has the air ride seats, and that was something that came along with the AC44s, and I think has stuck around for all the newer locomotives.
Yeah, we're motoring now. We're getting there. We're getting there. So some of the features that one of the features I really like about this, and like we spoke about it a bit earlier, is this little feature here, and that is opening the nose doors. I don't know why this really excites me so much, but it just does. And then you can sort of take your step down, and then you can really, you get that sound change at the front of the loco. I mean, amongst many features of this train, that is definitely one of my favourites. And the way the sound is done in this, that even like I know lots of trains and train sim have had the, if you open the window then you get sound, and it gets louder and quieter. But the fact you've really sort of nailed the sort of acoustics of it, like it sounds like you're in the train.
Right. Having spent 4 years in the chair as an engineer, and Nate's 4 years in the chair as a conductor, we've got the ear.
A lot of windows.
We've gotten the ear of how things should sound when you open things up. So we've changed how the EQ balancing is when you have a window open versus when you have the back door open and the front door open, depending on what sounds you're going to be able to hear reflecting off of trees or off of a flat plane or just the ground around you. So I spent a lot of time tweaking it. Kevin spent a lot of time tweaking it to really get that EQ balance nailed out correctly.
So I'm just looking at the MFDs here. So we literally have a full setup. So these multifunction displays actually are exactly as they are in the real thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, even down to the delay of that it takes to load a screen up.
Jesus. So if I go into say like speed control.
There are a few things that aren't functional based on, well, time constraints as well as game limitations. So the only things that are really accessible are your operator functions to display count or distance counter, as well as the locomotive monitor on the IFD, which is the leftmost screen.
It's just gone. That's my that's a Qtron. It's my alerter, isn't it, that's going off there.
Yep.
Beeping, yeah, that's cool. So there's just, I mean, for me, this is very much like we were talking about PMDG and saying about study level. And the way this is a study level train. Like you say, you could get it, you could buy it, get it and run it. But to really learn it and learn all the functions and all the features within the train themselves, the manual that comes with this is one of the best I have ever seen for a train in Train Simulator. It is to the point of being overly detailedly good. It is a read. It reminds me of being a kid and getting a new computer game back in the day when you could actually get the manual when you were in the car on the way home and you read the manual
Yeah.
before you got home and got to play it. And this really does it for me. When I was thinking about doing this video before I was going to have you guys, I was looking at it, I was thinking, really? Jesus, I'm going to have to print this off and actually sit and read it.
It's going to be a lot of ink and paper, though.
Yeah, it would be. It would be. How many pages is it off the top of your head? Does anybody know?
I think it's like 30-something, 33, 34.
61 pages total. And what our goal with the manual was to break it down so you have your basic systems for getting started, and then if you want to get down further and further, the further you read into the manual, the deeper you can understand the systems that the locomotive is operating on. So you can understand what the screens are doing, you can understand what the diagnostic information display is telling you, and some different procedures to recover from faults and all that. But it's all sorted in a priority of what you need to get moving and what you need to really understand what's going on.
And this is the diagnostic display. I've just gone to the back wall now to show this off. So if I cut out a traction motor, it will tell me what one's cut out. If I cut out, say, like the speed sensors and stuff, it will do the same with the traction control. It's just... Now, I know we've had traction motors cut in and cut out on Train Sim before, but we can literally go through the screen. So if we leave it like that and then go to show more and press show more, when I can get it to press because I'm moving a bit fast now, it can show us everything that's going on.
Yep. And if you have the locomotive monitor open on the IFD, you can actually see that traction motor getting cut out. You won't be able to see the speed, and you won't be able to see the tractive effort from that specific motor, which is measured in thousands of pounds.
Let's do that. Let's cut you out. Sorry, with the air ride seat, you have to get your eye right on the ball with this.
Oh,
yeah. It's a bit frustrating. And beyond that, not only are you visually cutting your traction motor out and being able to see that on the displays and the diagnostic display, but you actually can feel it too. Depending on,
it's sort of, you can really feel where it sort of pulls.
Right, and you'll notice your engine is pulling less and less and less the more motors you have to cut out or you do cut out.
And all of the fuses up here, I mean, they're all flickable. So
yep,
everything
and
is
they
flickable. The only things that aren't, I think if I remember you saying rightly, Woody, was the volume controls for your headsets.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have
Those don't
headsets
work in
that you
real
can
life
wear in
either.
the game. And they don't work in real life most of the time.
I love the AC on low written above the window. The AC on there, and then you've got Bear Foxtrot 101 was here. Some of the graffiti in the cab and stuff is there as well that I really, really like. One of the other things we spoke about on stream was the plaque that said "in memory of those who lost their lives." Do you want to explain that one to us, Woody?
Yeah. Last year there was a pretty nasty accident on the Kicking Horse Pass where a train had stopped an emergency and a relief crew came out to take over it. And while they were preparing to secure the train and recharge it and continue on down to field with it, the brakes intermittently released undesired release, and so the train left out of control and sped down the mountain and unfortunately derailed and killed 3 members of the Canadian Pacific family. So we thought it would be appropriate to add that in there.
That's a really nice little touch. Really nice touch. Very American, but nice touch. So with also talking about while being up here, the radio itself, even though there's nobody to talk to on the radio, everything works within the radio, doesn't it, as well?
Yes. So you can change channels. There's two channels that Canadian Pacific operate under. There'd be the main channel, which would be 9191, and then the RTC tone-up channel, which would be 2191.
So it's just crazy. The detail that is in this thing is sort of... I haven't got my headlights on. Even down to sort of the grime in the cab, the way the textures have been done is superb. One of my features I really liked, in the dark, this thing has a feature where you can turn shadowed lights on and off inside the cab. Do you want to explain that one to us, will you?
Yeah, for those of you that like to get the ultimate screenshots, something we did was enable the ability to turn on the shadow casting for the lights in the cab. That way, by default, they're not on, so you have performance, but you can turn them on if you have either a really good computer or you just really want to take a screenshot, and it will cast the shadows naturally how it would in real life with all the dimmable lights for the consoles and then the overhead lights as well.
It's just got features that, I mean, some of these features we've had before. I don't think we've ever had all of these features. We definitely never have had all of these features put into one locomotive. Again, the air ride seat, now we're up at sort of 36, 37 mile an hour. You can really see that giving you a nice bit of bounce. And like you say, that's a very realistic thing.
Yeah, it actually is. Your seat is absorbing all the track defects or soft spots or going over turnouts, and since your seat is absorbing that, you can kind of feel the rest of the cab moving without you. You're suspended.
So just another thing to talk about was we're just going past AI at the minute. Now you've got a new thing with the sounds with AI, haven't you? Do you want to run us through that?
Yeah, it's a feature called AIX, and though not fully exploited in the scenarios to its absolute potential, what it does as a basis is it will look at your AI train's speed, what kind of gradient it's running on, and if it's coming to a stop and all of that, it will throttle up the engine appropriately to match, say, how much effort it should be putting down for gaining speed or maintaining speed. Or if you're going downhill, if that AI train is going downhill, it will start activating the dynamic brakes to retain the speed. And you should be able to hear that depending on if the game engine is willing to cooperate and you can hear it. It also controls headlights, things like headlights. So when it's stopped, it will have the headlight on dim, and when it's moving, the headlight will be on bright with the ditch lights on. And then in a scenario, if you put down a marker, it will blow the horn for a crossing.
Wow, so that's something that we know AP did quite recently as well. I wanted to get the horn, so I want to wait till we get past this. I mean, the AI we've got going past at the minute is not Searchlight stuff. I mean, that's DTG's AC440 because of this route. But if you listen to the horn, so you can hear the sounds getting better the closer it gets. Something about an American train horn, I could sit and do that all day. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Nate, do you have a particular feature that you really like in this?
Oh man, that's a hard question. I'd have to think about that for a minute. Maybe you could hit Anthony and come back.
What about you, Woody? What's your favourite feature?
My favorite feature is just the depth of simulation that the tractive effort and say even the heating and cooling of the engine. So when you're running the train really hard and slow up a grade, the engine heats up really quickly, and you can hear the radiator fan that's computerized and driven by an AC motor reacting to it. And you can hear the fan speeding up and speeding down and all of this stuff going on. And if you're watching the locomotive monitor on the IFD, you can see all of this stuff going on. And it really just adds to the immersion of the experience.
I'd have to come back and say one of my favorites has to be, if nothing else, the sounds. Like I've been a huge. That's kind of what I take away from railroading at the end of the day is the enjoyment of the sounds, the horn, the equipment, and it's been captured so almost perfectly. It's been captured so well with this. It's just, I take a little pride in some of it. I did record those dynamic brake sounds, and that's another story for another time. But that was cold, hard, and worth it. So I always get a kick out of hearing those. But the sounds, by far, have to be my favorite part.
So also, Nate, earlier you were telling me about when we're talking about the braking of this unit, building back up pressure, that if you're in a winter scenario, it actually takes longer.
Yep, it'll take longer to recharge the air system on the train in a cold winter scenario versus a warm summer afternoon, because of, how the whole heating and cooling and expansion and contraction of the metal and even the rubber itself in between the cars. It's amazing. Like, I don't remember how I did it, but I was running the AC44 and somehow managed to get my lead engine to break away from the rest of the train, and after I went back up against it and put the air back to it, it took like 10 minutes to charge the air system back up because it was in the middle of winter. So it's really cool to see stuff like that, true to real life, And
I think that's what I take away from this massively, is the fact that we have the most detailed train I think we possibly could get, especially for North America, but in train sim, and the fact that you guys, for me, it's not really about the AC4400. For me, it's about what you have done with Train Simulator Classic. You and the likes of MKS and AP and things like that, pushing these barriers that we think are there. We think are there. And you've done this no holds barred. You've kind of gone, nah, we're just going to do exactly what we want. And I love that. I think that is so cool. And
Thank
there'll
you.
be people out there that'll go, oh, it's too much money, or it's not this. And I think, as we were talking earlier, this is for someone who wants a proper simulation out of Train Simulator.
Right, exactly.
And that, for me, is what makes me want to learn to drive it and learn to master it before I even worry about the operation of the US and Canadian railway operations. But just to take control of a machine and actually learn systems. Learn how systems work, why are systems used the way they are. And this does a beautiful job with that. I mean, even things like the end of train device. Now, that's actually featured in this pack as well. You get the end of train device and it functions, is that correct?
Yeah, it actually communicates your brake pipe pressure from the rear of the train. It also includes telemetry data, such as when your train is moving forward or moving in reverse or it's stopped. And then it also has the two-way communication for placing your train in emergency. So if you open up the fighter pilot style missile switch, you can put your train in emergency from the rear if you're having problems with getting air to set from the front end. Or you would actually, in most situations, you would operate both simultaneously.
It's just crazy, and this is one of my favourite little ones here. This attendance call button, like switch that works. It's like, that's cool. That's very.
That's how you agitate the guy sleeping on the second engine if he's there. It's the best way. I've used it before to summon someone.
Well, that's what it's there for, but of course that never happened on the real railways.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Never once.
No. So I'm in awe of it, and this hasn't shown off. I think we might have shown off maybe 5% of what this train can do. But I really would love to say a massive thank you to you guys. And I think, how do you want me to end this? Should we make it stop? How are we going to make it stop? You guys pick what we're going to do to make it stop.
I vote for the missile switch.
What's your call?
Yeah, that would actually show off the proper PCS valve simulation. So
yeah, go through the recovery, and I think that's a good way to a high note to end it on.
Yeah, let's do that then. So let's flick that switch.
He's been waiting the entire day to flick that switch.
Love it.
So what you'll have to do to reset that is put your throttle in idle and then follow the prompts on either screen, and it'll tell you what to do.
Okay. Operator emergency. To recover, move handle to emergency. So that's the brake handle, yeah?
Yep.
Right, love that traction motor wind down as well there.
That is one of my favorite parts, I have to admit. Another one of my multiple favorite. See, you had to go and make me try to pick one.
Keep handle in emergency for 60 seconds. Now, if I remember rightly, this counts down in 10-second segments. Is that right, Woody?
Yeah, that's correct.
What does AB info mean, Woody?
That would be air brake info. So that means it's telling you about some sort of information regarding the air brake valve. Yeah. So in this case, it's telling you about the penalty.
And PCS, what does that stand for?
That would be the pneumatic control switch. It basically disables your ability to put down any power while the valve or the PCS is open.
Right. So I've got 20 seconds left. Now, earlier on, we were also saying that this thing has got its own load bank testing as well.
Yes, it does.
I'm going to cover it in another video, but that is crazy as well.
Yeah, you can actually hear the grid blowers that the engine is being run against speeding up along with the amount of horsepower that's being put down.
Jeez. Right. To recover, move handle to release. That's beeping at me.
Yep.
That's your end of train device. It'll beep every few pounds the rear comes back up to you. So it's kind of if you hear it beeping on and off, sometimes in real life anyway, you'll hear it beep. It'll vary the pressure on the rear sometimes if there's a bad reader valve in the marker.
So it's really cool. And I mean, earlier on when we did a little test with this, I got a randomised sort of error, wasn't it, with the end of train device that said it had lost communications with it. Do you want to explain that again for me, Nate?
Yeah, very true to real life. Every now and then you're going through tunnels or a densely treed-in area. If you got a long enough train, it definitely happens on the longer ones. The head end box in the locomotive will lose communication with the device on the rear, so your rear end reading will blank out, and it doesn't affect anything really. You're supposed to, I believe, go operate at max speed of 30 when it happens, but it's been scripted to randomly, come in at different intervals, just like the real thing.
That's a
and it'll throw the same 3 beeps at you real quick that it throws when the rear end goes into emergency too. So it's a real nice wake up call in the middle of the night.
It's crazy. It is crazy. And I mean, learning about things like this is part of my passion for train sim. Like we're talking about controlling a machine, but also hearing your guys' real world stories of it and things like that just really makes this for me. Absolutely.
Oh, trust me, we got stories. Not many can be repeated in a family setting.
Yeah,
but
that's it.
We'll have to save that for a stream.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so.
I've actually just lost my monitor quickly, so I don't know what's going to happen with that on the video. Let's have a look. No, it's fine. Just paused it. Sorry, sometimes I get a slight power out and my monitor goes a bit funny, but no, that should be fine. Okay, so my rear is at 20.
Oh, you'll be there a while.
You can try pulling on them, but you're not going to go very far.
No, I can understand that. What's that got to get up to? About 100 and something?
Up to 90. To be fully released. It should start releasing around 75 to 80.
Do you have a compressor speed up switch on these?
Unfortunately,
actually,
no.
The way to speed up the compressor on this, because when you have your reverser centered and the throttle and idle, it'll idle down to about 335 RPM. Mm-hmm. To speed it up, you keep that reverser centered, but you put it up into throttle 1, and it'll double the compressor speed to double the engine speed. So it should run at 880 some RPM. The compressors on the GE locomotives are a Wabtec 3CDC compressor. They're motor driven by an AC motor.
Right.
And
yeah, it's not
yeah,
mechanical.
no,
I'm just
which is
gonna
a
go
huge
outside here.
advantage. Which is a huge advantage over the EMDs of the same time. They a lot of those are shaft driven, so you have to run the engine up a lot further than to get the compressor to pump the same amount of GE would at basically high idle.
Right, let's get these doors open while we're sitting here. Let's go and take a quick leak. It's just very, very cool to see that door open on the front there.
It's actually one of the things that I've liked doing for, and I'd like to do in a couple more scenarios, is you pass a train doing a crew change, and you have the crew members boarding a train with the doors open next to you while you're sliding up to do your crew change.
Ah, that would be really, really cool.
Yeah, so there's more scenarios in progress for the CP AC44 to show off a bit more of the technology. A lot of one of them is going to have faults. One of them is going to have some slow orders where you actually have to look at your paperwork and understand, oh, okay, at this location I have to go down to 20 miles an hour or 10 miles an hour for the length of the train. And then once your rear end clears, you use that distance counter to know where your rear end is, and you can speed up back to track speed.
It's just so cool. Love it. We'll stick some power on and see if we actually get anywhere. Do you know another way I'm measuring my brakes? I'm going up and outside and seeing how much of the silver bit of the cylinder's left open.
If you bail off your brake cylinder with the left bracket,
Yeah.
it will. Yeah, your brake cylinder should come back in, so you shouldn't have any brake cylinders on the thing. Unfortunately, with the cars, I didn't want to take the time to animate the brake cylinders on all of the cars too. They're a lot lower detail than the locomotives are, because in some scenarios you're populating 3 or 4 trains, which is about 400 to 500 cars of rail cars. So having something that high of detail would definitely murder a lot of computers.
Definitely. Let's run it. Run the RPM up a little bit and see if that's going to speed me up a bit. 63 on the rear now.
Yeah, they should start coming off pretty soon.
I think we might be slightly ready to move, you know?
The thing is, when you go into emergency, you are exhausting all of the brake pipe pressure in the train,
Completely,
as
yeah.
well as, and then in your emergency and auxiliary reservoirs, it's applying all of the air in those reservoirs to the brake cylinders of each car. So you're having to recharge all of those tanks on the train.
I'm really hoping we can do this without time, because I know we're running out of time for Nate here. So what I will do is we will hope that by the time that we've said goodbye that this might have moved. So what can I say? Really, guys, all I can say is a massive thank you from me especially for pushing the limits in Train Sim Classic. Something I'm really, really pleased to see. And I can't actually thank you enough for doing that, because hopefully this gives other developers the ideas and a bit of inspiration to do the same sort of thing and go to the same level of detail. I don't have any complaints about it whatsoever. I really, really don't. I think it's fantastically done. And I wish you all the best for your sales in the future with this thing.
Thank you.
It's a lot to hear.
Is there anything you guys would like to add before we go?
I don't have anything. What about you, Anthony?
Just to discuss the pricing a little bit, because it's been a bit of a point of controversy. Currently, the AC44 is selling for $34.99 US, and it includes one livery, but it's a super detailed model. And the way that I best explain it is, it's like you're buying a brass model train. The brass trains are usually the ones that have the extreme amount of detail, like
Yes.
the rivets and bolts and all of that. So you're buying something that's definitely worth the $34.99, and subsequent packages for the Canadian Pacific, because this is the base package, say the dual flag livery or as delivered Golden Beaver, or the plain Canadian Pacific with no logos, those will be priced at $4.99. So you buy the base package for $34.99, and then any additional skin for that railway will be $4.99. So if somebody likes Canadian Pacific, you can really fully kit out your thing, and those additional liveries are not only just a reskin, but they come detailed per each series that it's trying to represent. So like the dual flags will have the high-ad trucks and have this kind of paneling, and it'll have air conditioning versus these don't, and it'll have different vents and intakes and all those small details and changes within the cab, which cabs are definitely one of the highest sought after things for me, because every model you go into is different based on when it was made. The companies have gone, okay, you know, what works here, what can we change to make it better, where can we move some stuff. So panels are different, locations of things are different, types of screens are different depending on what year you're modeling. So like an as delivered, you'd have 2 IFDs, whereas this one's got an SDIS, which has trip optimizer. So if you wanted Canadian Pacific and you wanted to go all out on Canadian Pacific and have every type, you wouldn't be spending as much. You wouldn't be spending, say, $20 for each livery. It's your $34.99 plus $5 basically for each one. And then the same will be true for other liveries such as Union Pacific. You buy Union Pacific and you say, oh, well, I really like Southern Pacific. Well, I'm going to get the SP one for $4.99. And if you like C&W, you can get the C&Ws for $4.99. And they're all, like I said, they're all kitted differently. It's not just one package. And something we're working on doing too is having some more unique engine sounds, which do take a lot of time to record and engineer to sound good in the game. So each engine that you buy that's an AC44, yes, it'll sound similar because it's the same type of engine, but you'll have different sounds.
I don't seem to be pulling any amps, Woody. What have I done?
None at all?
No. According to the HUD.
Okay, is it pulling anything on the screen? Is your reverser's forward, right?
Yeah.
And on the screens, is it showing effort?
No green bar. I've broken it big time. That's my usual way, how I've set it up. Now, the pricing you've just given us figures in is, of course, in US dollars, isn't it, Woody?
Yeah.
And it is something you're constantly working on and constantly updating, so it's not something that's just going to be made and then left to rot, is it? It's not going to be one of those sorts of products. It's something you guys have invested 7 years of time in already, so it's not like you're just going to watch this thing crash and burn. So that's really interesting to hear. I think the general price of Train Simulator add-ons at the minute is going up anyway, especially something as detailed as big as this. When people get very picky about what little details they want to see in trains, you can expect you have to pay for those little details to be put in trains. So I can completely understand that, and I know it will always be a bone of contention with a lot of people. But as you said earlier, this isn't really a starter's person's locomotive. Yes, you could use it as a start. If you were coming fresh into Train Sim and you'd never driven anything, you could get this and you could learn to drive it. Of course you could. But it wouldn't be sort of what you'd be aiming at a $4.99, $5.99 market.
No.
And I think that's fantastic. I think it's fantastic the way you've built this for a purpose and you've made it as accessible as you can, but at the same time you've turned around and said, look, yes, it isn't for just someone who wants to turn up, press a button and go. It's something you are going to have to take a little bit of time to learn and drive, which I really, really like, and I like the way and hope that that's the way things go forward with a lot of other companies as well. So I'm going to make sure we can get Nate off. So I say thank you very much to you both again. Do take care of yourselves. I look forward to doing a video with you in the future as well, where I've learned to drive this a little bit more and I can show you how I'm doing.
Well, thank you very much for having us.
You're more than welcome, guys.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome. All right, and guys, thanks ever so much for joining me. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Head over to talentthomsonsim.com and also head over to Searchlight Simulations. Have a buy of this if this is up your street. Even if it's not, if you want to see what the pinnacle of Train Sim development, locomotive development is at the moment, this is it for me. This is definitely it, even though it's Yank. Canadian. It is incredibly good, and I can't fault it, if I'm honest with you. Head over to Twitch from a Wednesday and a Sunday evening from 7 PM, and also head over to Facebook. That's in the link is in the description below for both of those. Once again, guys, thanks ever so much, and I'll catch you next time.